They read us in, only a little. People think you just get all the info at once. That's not how secret programs stay secret. We were only told what we needed to know. I didn't even realize those damn things were from space until I actually saw a body. And then it was sort of like, okay, yeah, you figured that out, here's a bit more info. For all I know, I never did learn the whole truth. But I do know a lot of it, and I'm kind of tired of sitting on it all these years. Plus, what are they going to do now to an old man? That's the thing. If they did anything to me or that Grush guy, well, it just sort of validate his story, right? Better leave us alone and let the world just think we're crazy. Speaking of Grush, I like him. He's confident, he's strict on following procedure. That's what makes him so frustrating. Everyone wants him to come out and say everything, but he's doing it right, only saying what he can outside of a classified briefing. I think he's a patriot. If he just wanted fame, he'd come out and say everything. Again, if they put him in jail for it, well, that's kind of admitting that he really did share some classified info, isn't it? Is he telling the truth, though? I don't know. A lot of what I've heard him say sounds right, but I've been out of it for 20 years now, and things change. And who knows what the whole truth is anyway. So, do I think he's lying or telling the truth? I think he's telling more truth than not, especially that part about aerospace contractors being involved. I know that's true. But I also don't ever underestimate how far these groups will go to create disinformation. And it's not just about deceiving the American public. Let me tell you, I spent about 30 years with the program, and the group is full of true blue-blooded patriots. He sort of had to be handling the most dangerous technology in the world. Imagine if we had another Manhattan Project and somebody ran off with a piece of that tech to the Soviets. Nobody liked lying to the public. But the thing people forget is we're not the only ones aware or at least suspecting that something is going on. The Soviets, well, the Russians now, the Chinese, hell, the Israelis too. Everyone's looking for any scrap of information they can get. Disinformation is real, but it's not directed at the American public. Well, mostly not. The fact is, I can tell you right now, the government does not want you thinking about UFOs. It makes recovery hard. It makes keeping it all a secret even harder. I don't think anyone was ever scared of mass panic or anything like that. Maybe now they are, I don't know. But not back then. It's all about keeping material out of the hands of the adversaries. Anyway, so after I got read in, you'd think there was some sort of special club you joined or something. Not really. Not for at least a year after that first crash, at least. We got put back on regular duty, only our unit got broken up. And that's bad. You don't do that to a team. But it happened. Also, I know for a fact we got put into the worst messes they could cook up. I know 5 of the original 12 died in combat, 3 more badly wounded. I think they were trying to kill us off. But about a year after that first crash, that's when I got brought in officially. As in, now my primary job was doing this stuff. Well, when it happened, it didn't happen often, but these things did fall out of the sky, or people would see something land or witness beings happening more often than people know. And we'd swoop in as fast as we could in case there was anything to snatch up. I think we pulled 3 total craft out of theater, and not just Vietnam. Damn near started a war with China in one recovery, but thank God their early warning systems were primitive back then, and it was close to the border. I don't think we could do that today. Europe was another hot spot, but most people don't know that. I'm not sure if anything ever crashed into the ocean. If it did, we definitely couldn't pull it out, I don't think. But Europe was always sort of ready for war at any moment. You had bombers with live nukes on constant patrol, electronic intelligence aircraft, military exercises all the time. All this on both sides of the border. A lot of activity. So they were probably curious. I think they did a better job keeping things quiet in Europe than in the US. But I think our media was a bit freer at the time, so you'd get UFO reports in major newspapers within a day of an event. Also, the Europeans kinda turned their nose up at the whole UFO thing. A lot more Americans were believers than Europeans, which made it easier to keep it a secret. The crafts themselves were extraordinary. That's the only way to describe them. I wasn't there for every single recovery, obviously, but they kept collections of them in different places and I got to see 2 of the collections. Everyone always looks at Wright-Patterson and the Foreign Technologies Division. How stupid do you think we are? That'd be the dumbest place to take this stuff because it'd be the first place Soviet spies would come looking. They wanted to know what we knew about them already. I can tell you what though, we faked some stuff going into Wright-Patterson, enough to stir up rumors because that's where we wanted the Soviets looking. It was fun, it was like a big game, and you had to play right into it. So a few enlisted guys spotted something strange and then they just let the rumor mill do its work. The real stuff didn't go to Wright-Patterson. There were a few government sites. Sorry, I don't want to tell you where because a lot of important work is still being done there. But there were these co-op sites run by the government and the big defense contractors. People like Raytheon, Boeing, everyone knows their names. But also people like Texas Instruments. It was a whole umbrella. But the little guys only got a tiny piece of the puzzle. Some guys from TI would get a piece of something and then be asked to figure out how it works, never being told where it came from. And on its own, I'm sure these eggheads had their suspicions, but it's hard to tell if something's actually alien. Alright, so that Grush guy is right about defense contractors being involved. You can't get their records, they're private companies. But you better believe that they don't pull the strings. Boeing's CEO isn't going to tell the US military he'll take the saucer out that they gave him for a joyride. But there are legal considerations, if this stuff becomes public and they reverse engineer it. Who owns the tech? Who gets to profit? Boeing or the US taxpayers who donated the stuff to keep it out of sight? I think a lot of people are thinking about that right now. The spacecraft themselves, and I'm only guessing they're spacecraft by the way, at least I know that they can go to space because we track them coming in and out all the time, but I don't think a lot of people are convinced that that's where they're really coming from. Instead, I think that's where they want us to think they're coming from. Anyway, so there are different shapes. The UFO people on the internet have done a pretty good job compiling the data on their own. I saw a chart someone made one time of the most commonly reported objects, and it's pretty accurate. So you got your flying eggs, your tic-tacs, I guess you now call them, we just call them pills, your old-fashioned saucers, bells, triangles, whole mess of shapes. But the ones that crash are almost always the eggs and the bells, and they're smaller too. I think they're the drones that are remotely operated. And when they crash, you have to get really lucky because they have a habit of just disintegrating. Maybe it's a self-destruct mechanism, I don't know. The saucers, they were the crown jewels. I heard of several crashes, but I was only ever on a recovery of 2 saucers. I don't know what they're made of, but these things are tough. Once we recovered one in South America. I won't say where, because last I heard stuff was still ongoing there, and it wouldn't be very popular with the citizens if they found out their government was secretly collaborating with the US. Anyway, the saucer we recovered had hit the side of a rocky outcropping on its way down. It smashed the rock to pieces, then took out a 1/4 mile of trees. If it had happened on the outskirts of civilization, the whole UFO mystery would have been public knowledge by now. That's how much destruction that thing caused. But the craft itself was relatively unharmed. Later, once I was more senior and I moved into the administrative side of things, I learned the craft was either formed out of a single piece of material or put together at the atomic level. Incredibly strong stuff, however they do it. And like I said, not a single seam is visible. Even the entrance is invisible until it actually opens. That's how tight the tolerances are. By the way, that one took us a while to open. It took us a long time to figure out how to actually open these things without resorting to destructive means. And that's the good news. We could cut or melt or blast our way in if we wanted to, so these things can be destroyed. It means we have a fighting chance if they ever turn bad on us. Though, I don't think it'd matter. They'd probably just drop some rocks on our heads and wait for the ice age to end. We're like schoolyard kids armed with pebbles against these things. We can cut them open and we can shoot them down occasionally. It took a while to pull that thing out of the jungle and get it on a ship back to the States. By the time we opened it, well, have you ever opened a fridge full of food after the power's been out for a few days? The discs are manned. I don't know if these things died on impact or after, but there was nothing alive when we cracked it open. I guess everyone wants to know about these things. I call them things on purpose, not out of disrespect or anything like that. I just don't think any of us were ever convinced they were actually living creatures. Well, not in the sense that you and I are. For one, they don't have much of a digestive system, just enough to process the food they get from the ship itself, kind of like an IV. There is no actual stomach to hold large amounts of food like normal animals. So that kind of made us suspicious that these weren't really what was behind this whole thing. I don't know how many live ones were ever found, but I know that we found 2 alive in one crash. Well, it was less a crash and more of a hard landing. What I mean is this thing was intact with barely any damage and had clearly avoided smashing into the surrounding countryside. But witnesses said there'd been a big flash of light and a loud sound over the mountains. This was in the UK. People had reported seeing something fiery go across the sky all across the UK, but it turns out it was an honest-to-God coincidence. A big meteor had hit a nearby area at the same time that this thing came down. Obviously, the British were in on it along with us and a few other major NATO partners, so we concentrated on getting these things before the Soviets. It was a default agreement that all recovered materials went back to the US, which made the Europeans a bit sore, but that's the price you pay to have a superpower watching your back, I guess. Anyway, we were pretty sure, at least on a few occasions, they snagged a few bits for themselves.